They can break your cookie, but you'll always have your fortune. This is vaguely scientific. The sum or product of two real numbers is also a real number, and I really am Derek. The order in which numbers are added or multiplied does not change the sum or product. Therefore, A times B equals B times A, and Jim the scientist equals the scientist Jim. Hi, Jim.
Huh. I had no idea where that was going to go.
Yeah, neither did I.
I liked it.
All right, well, every natural number has a successor that is also a natural number. No two natural numbers have the same successor, and our guest this week is the one and only Joe.
Well, I guess I am the only one. There are no other Joes, ever.
No other Joes.
Period.
You're the only one I know that I'm talking to currently.
You're still the one. Still the Joe.
There, now... We've gotten the educational portion of the show out of the way.
Yeah.
This is a show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers, and who knows, we might even get some of those answers right. But first, it's time for the fun science fact of the day. Jim?
Awesome. I learned this in a magazine about wine. And so apparently there are these things called orange wines, and these are wines that are made with white wine grapes, but the skins are left in contact with the juices, which is a typical thing that we see with red wines and not white wines. And so this leads to a very different flavor profile compared with both reds and whites.
Yep. So I assumed that it was wine that was made with oranges.
Yeah, they have those too. Well, not made with oranges, but like infused with oranges.
Oh, okay.
And so that makes it a lot harder to find these.
Interesting.
Because I really wanted to try it after I heard about it. I was like, that sounds interesting because it's different. And I actually really enjoyed the one that I found, but it was really hard to find one because they also just make wines that are infused with oranges.
Yep.
I think that's called a screwdriver.
No, that's
wine.
Vodka with an orange.
Yeah, you actually have to, when you're looking for these wines, it's usually easier to look for skin contact wine than orange wine.
Yeah, that's what I learned.
Sounds so gross.
It does actually sound really gross.
I think wine is gross anyway, but that...
one's just, they just soak them with some bodies.
Yeah. Also, fun fact that goes along with that, rosé is actually the opposite. So it's red wine, but they remove the skins earlier in the process.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, for whatever reason, my wife randomly started getting some wine enthusiast magazine in the mail. And I was flipping through it one day, and they had a whole big thing about orange wines. And I just got sucked into it. Because I was like, I've never heard of this before. Also, very interesting, that magazine was very much in favor of plastic screw top caps because they say that it keeps the air out much better than a cork does.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now they did add the caveat that if you want it to age faster, then you do probably want a cork. But if you want it to like stay basically locked in stasis, plastic screw top cap. Plus it's easier to open, they said. So
speaking of screw tops. I
now
thought Jim would appreciate that one.
Wow, that hit me like a brick.
I thought you would appreciate that one. I think we should move on to our first question this week.
Yeah.
Which comes to us from Brandon. What are the most compelling arguments for the moon landing conspiracy theory, i.e. the hardest to debunk?
So I will say this, that as I was going through the list of moon landing conspiracies, I was having a really hard time finding ones that were not easy to debunk.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me dive in because I kind of teased both of you with thinking I might have an interesting take on this question.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to suggest that this question is difficult to answer for the large community. It is a personal question, I think. And I think that there are a lot of different entry points to the understanding of the facts. For example, it would be easier to convince me that the moon landing had been faked than it would to convince Buzz Aldrin that the moon landing had been faked.
Yeah, that would be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And but it would be easier to convince somebody who does not believe space exists.
True. Yeah.
Right? So, and that's where you kind of get into, if you're trying to actually convince somebody of something, you kind of have to look at where they are, because there is no point really in telling anybody all the specs of Apollo 11 and talking about the trajectory of the space shuttle and slingshotting around the moon if they flat out do not believe in space.
Right.
So you kind of have to start by saying, okay, let's convince you that there is space first, right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah, so I do have an answer for me personally, what I found the most. I mean, the preface being that all three of us believe we went to the moon, right?
Yes. Well, I hope.
I'm fairly convinced that at least two of us do. I guess technically I haven't talked to Joe about it.
Well, yeah, that's right. I was going to say everyone here knows I think we've gone to the moon, so...
I came up with one answer that I found to be a compelling, I guess, piece of the puzzle to the moon landing conspiracy theory that I hadn't considered before, but I have several tangents to go on from there.
Oh, okay.
I may kind of hold on to that because I wanted to say, for me, it was a higher point of entry because I've read a lot about the moon landing event, whereas I could see somebody who's never really looked into the moon landing. Like, it's really common, you know, we were taught as kids we went to the moon, and if you never really looked into it, the first time you hear somebody say that was all a lie, you don't really have a basis to disagree with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that the one that I saw that I really couldn't immediately think of a reason why this happened was the fact that a lot of the original tapes from the Apollo 11 mission were erased or lost. Now, this is one of those things that, as a person who enjoys learning about media in general from time to time, I know that back in the 60s and 70s, sometimes tapes were just erased and reused because they were expensive and hard to get. But it is weird. Like, I don't understand why someone thought, oh, we'll never need the original tapes from the moon landing. That'll
Right?
never be important in history again. So
It's just not a considerable human achievement.
yeah. So the fact that someone thought, oh, these tapes are fine. We got so many copies of the moon landing just because they're slightly lower quality. Who cares? It's like, I don't know why someone would do that. And it's weird that they did. And I know that there's probably a perfectly logical explanation, or I should at least say a perfectly mundane explanation, even if it might be a little illogical to the rest of us. But that's really the one that I was like, oh man, that's a weird thing that happened and it really shouldn't have.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I learned the fact from you, I believe, from Jim, on this show, I think, that they don't have, or they didn't at the time have accurate blueprints to what the first space shuttle was because they had to keep making tweaks to it.
Oh,
and they just didn't really
Saturn
document
5,
those.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, that was something else I saw that was listed as a conspiracy, but apparently the moon buggy from, I think it was Apollo 16, they don't have actual blueprints of it anymore, like sheets of paper that they sketched it out on. But I guess the microfilm still exists, but for whatever reason, because there are no actual like blueprints that are printed out, they say that, oh, it's a conspiracy and they've lost this. And that in particular, they have not lost. It's actually documented on microfilm, which is not easy to read, but you can. You got to find a reader for it.
For me, it's it really comes back to the fact that I understand how the trips to the moon were very costly and, quite frankly, very, in some ways, kind of disastrous. But it's the fact we didn't continue to try that always kind of makes me, just in the back of my head, go, but did we even make it there the first time?
See, I've heard that from people that I have spoken to I don't want to say a decent amount because I don't know what numbers really make sense. I've spoken to double digits of moon landing deniers in the past 5 years because I was very interested in this topic. It was research for a play I wrote. But and that's something that came up a lot that I actually thought was interesting is like, if we actually went there, why didn't we go back? And so my retort was, well, we have been back, but I understand what you're saying, Joe, is like,
why did we stop in 1973?
Right.
Basically, since Apollo 17, we haven't tried again.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that there was a change in geopolitics at that time because there was the Vietnam War. There was that kind of thought of, well, look, we already won the race. We don't need to worry about the moon anymore. And then NASA internally had been turning its attention away from Apollo program and actually shifting to like the space shuttle program.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously also like the ISS. But it's still one of those things that, like, especially with the ISS in mind, to me, of why not use the moon as a intermediary.
Right. Well, there were a lot of I don't want to say concerns, but there were a lot of people talking, and kind of there still are when we're talking about Mars and colonizing the moon and etc. There are people who think that it is not the best place to allocate our resources because there's a lot of things that need funding on Earth. I think you already touched on the fact that like it was massively expensive to go to the moon the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an achievement. It was an exploring, but from a financial perspective, I guess, did we bring anything back resource-wise? And that was the argument that a lot of people made, is that no, it was exploratory, but we're not getting anything from it.
Right. Yeah, like the most that we brought back were like literally it was just rock. Like it was rock and space dust.
Right.
And you know, which is great for science, but
and the other thing is that the more and more they did it, the less interesting it got. And so people were just like, "Oh, it's another moon landing. Woohoo, big deal." And so, and that's ratings. The thing. Yeah, like you're not getting people as attracted to the idea anymore. And so it's like, well, if people don't care anymore, then why are we even doing this? And it's like there are scientists that care, and I'm sure there were a lot of industrial folks that really cared about trying to go to the moon and like mine it and things like that. But the general public lost interest, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it was, 9 trips to the moon and 6 landings?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of reason for it. But, I don't know. It just... That's always been one of those things that just always back of the mind sort of thing.
That's an interesting intake on it, because that's not... where I expected most of us to go is like a technical thing or an evidence-based thing. That's like a kind of philosophical, like it could have been a lie because we haven't gone back. Like that's interesting.
Yeah, basically once this Apollo program ended, which admittedly would then also mean that we faked 6 more landings.
Sure. Right.
But yeah, it brings up the question of, why not? But especially as we did begin to set our sights even further out, like, for example, which telescope is it that is at like the farthest Lagrange point?
Oh, the James Webb.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, like with the James Webb, that would have made sense. And then also, again, as we're looking now out towards Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, having something where, it takes a lot of energy to get it to the moon. And then from there, you maybe have more time and less bad windows to then leave Earth's gravity well to continue out towards those.
Yeah, one of the big advantages to leaving from the moon is that there is way less gravity. And so not only do you use less fuel, but on the moon, things like mass drivers are actually feasible. On Earth, I don't really think that it's tremendously feasible to use a mass driver. I think you can. It would have to be gigantic, but like impractically large, like a few kilometers long. But on the moon, you can get that done pretty easily. And not only that, but there is water on the moon. It's like trapped in rocks, but you could take that apart and turn it. You could turn it into hydrogen and oxygen, and you're going to refuel your rockets up on the moon.
Yeah.
So I have a joke that I say sometimes that I probably think is funnier than anyone else does. But if somebody says something nonsensical to me, I'll say, I can't argue with your logic because you didn't use any. You know, that kind of... But I always meant that as just a one-liner in my head until I was actually kind of thinking about how it lines up with something else that I've heard. And for the life of me, I could not find who to attribute this quote to. It is something to the effect of, you can't debunk a conspiracy theory with anything so mundane as facts. Which is a joke, but it's true. Because if you are going to argue with somebody who is on a sticking point that is not based on logic, then logic is not going to convince them of anything. And again, going back to the whole, you have to meet people where they are, you have to figure out where the actual lack of understanding or disagreement comes from. I find that a lot of times this and also the flat earth conspiracy, kind of the biggest contributing factor to this, not the only, but the biggest, is the argument from personal incredulity. The idea that if you specifically can't understand a concept, it must be wrong because you don't understand it, right? And so the reason I thought of this is Jim's comment about the mass driver. The idea that it would have to be so big, that it would have to be something kind of unfathomable. The idea that people went to the moon. The idea that the Earth is round when we as an individual can look over and see the horizon. And from us, it looks like a table is flat. So the world must be flat. That's a person not being able to wrap their head around scale. And I wanted to reference Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which there is a cosmic horror sort of machine on the Frog Star, which the idea is you go inside of it and it traumatizes you by showing you exactly how small you are in comparison to the rest of the universe.
What's it called? The Infinite Perspective Chamber or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I like it because Zaphod Beeblebrox goes in there and comes out absolutely fine. And they're like, how could you have survived that? And he's like, because I'm Zaphod Beeblebrox.
Yeah, I'm the most important person in the universe.
I'm the
so
most
therefore...
important person. Yeah. The other point I kind of wanted to make, and I brought up, it'd be easier to convince me than it would be to convince Buzz Aldrin. But it's kind of important to me that we look at what the definition of proof versus evidence is. Because in theory, you cannot 100% prove anything like we landed on the moon. But we're not actually trying to do that. We are trying, like in a criminal conviction case, we are trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that all of the evidence lines up. Because even Buzz Aldrin could say, if he were delusional or something, he could say, I think they just strapped a VR headset to me and it was all meant like I could hold a pencil up in front of you and tell you I'm holding a pencil and you could be like, that, I don't know, that could be just your finger with paint on it.
Right.
You can be, the human brain is so immensely imaginative that there is always going to be room for doubt.
Yeah.
But is it reasonable? That's what we're getting at.
And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people forget with the moon landing conspiracies is that the United States is not the only country that had access to the ability to see this going on. So if there was reasonable doubt that the moon landing was faked, then It wouldn't even just be the Soviet Union that's like, we got you.
Right.
It would be, 30 or 40 other countries that we were on pretty bad terms with at the time during the Cold War, all sort of jumping down our throat.
Right.
But for the Soviet Union to be like, okay, fair game, I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And that's why obviously we had to get somebody with such immense genius like Stanley Kubrick to handle it, right?
Yeah. Actually, what's really funny, I started reading the novelization for 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
Which is really interesting because it's actually quite a bit different than the movie in some ways. More in the sense that it goes into a lot more detail than the movie does because it's a novel. But it was really neat because it had a big foreword in the front that was written by Arthur C. Clarke, talking about his time working with Stanley Kubrick. One of the things that he brings up is the fact that he's really glad that Stanley Kubrick had switched over in the novel. It's actually, they go to Saturn and find the monolith. Mm-hmm. And in the movie, they go to Jupiter. And he was saying that he was really glad that Stanley Kubrick was such a perfectionist that none of the models of Saturn that they brought in looked good enough for him. So that's why he switched to Jupiter. And it's a good thing that happened because when we actually saw close-up images of Saturn, they were quite a bit different than what models were at the time. So, and that's something that I saw in some of the conspiracies is that if you actually watch 2001, a lot of those like moon sets don't really match up exactly with how things look on the moon.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So even something that we had a decent understanding of, Kubrick still kind of got wrong. Not much, but noticeably.
Yeah. I wanted to mention that in the Mythbusters episode, when they tested all of the moon landing conspiracy theories, I remember one in particular is they tested the can you get the shadows as depicted in the photographs without divergent light sources? I remember Adam Savage looking at the camera at one point and saying, no, I know we're going to get comments on this, that we are the exact type of people that they would have hired to fake the moon landing. And we're not doing that. We're just testing, we're debunking the things, etc. And I remember thinking that like, even in demonstrating the physics and demonstrating how the moon actually would work, whenever it goes against like an intuition that people have, you suddenly kind of abandon thinking in terms of we're dealing with a planet that has lower gravity.
Right.
You just look at it and say, oh, that looks fake. It looks like CGI or something. So that's, I don't know, fascinating to me that I guess even people who study the physics, you have to force yourself to not make a lot of assumptions based on your preconceived notions of things.
Right. It's actually surprisingly hard to get people to be able to move like they do in those videos of the moon. Down here on Earth, I should say. Because on Earth, we do have full gravity no matter where you go. And the moon's gravity is 1/6 of what it is on Earth. So in order to make someone look like they're moving around on the moon, it's actually pretty challenging. And this is something that they have to deal with when they're training astronauts, because simulating zero gravity or low gravity environments on Earth takes a lot of effort. And we can do zero gravity and some low gravity stuff by using that airplane, the Vomit Comet, which is actually famously, I think, how they filmed a lot of Apollo 13.
Oh, okay.
But even still, I mean, the ability to do that is not something you can keep secret. Like flying these planes around all the time for however long somebody would be on the moon, someone would notice these planes doing the weird maneuvers in the sky and be like, what's that thing doing up there, going up and down and creating low gravity environments?
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to give a brief explanation of how the Vomit Comet works?
Sure.
So that we...
Yeah. Because so the way it works is that the plane will climb up and then it will very quickly dive back down. And while it's diving, everything inside is in free fall. And so you get that zero gravity simulation. And then when it hits the bottom of that loop, it'll have to climb back up and then it'll dive back down again. And it'll do several up and down dives, however long it needs to do this for the training purposes. Also, I think OK Go might have filmed a music video in this thing.
Oh, interesting.
I think you might be right. Also, I know that there is a medical procedural called The Resident that filmed an episode on it.
Well, that's interesting.
But they didn't hide the fact that that's what they were using it for. It was literally like this kid who was dying. It was one of his last things he wanted to do. And so he has the resident, Dr. Hawkins, go with him as his medical personnel to make sure that he's safe doing it. Ironically, it's not the kid who ends up needing the doctor while they're doing it. Someone else ends up having a heart attack during it, which is actually a concern with when you're doing rapid, changes in pressure like that, which it can cause. Sense.
Oh, yeah.
Because it causes both, the change in gravity, but then you also have the rapidly shifting pressures as it climbs in the atmosphere and then drops back down in the atmosphere. And while it's a sealed tube and it does help protect against that, it's not perfect.
Right. And that's the other thing, is that when you're climbing back up, there's a lot of gravity.
Right.
It's more than Earth's gravity at that point. So
it's like going up on a roller coaster real fast.
Yeah.
You're being pushed back. Okay, so we're talking about physics now. I will tell you the thing that I landed on. Not the moon, but the conspiracy theory.
I've never been to the moon.
I've never been to the moon. Me personally, I've never been there. Oh.
Is it nice?
Joe was there.
It's cold.
That doesn't sound right.
So I picked one example of a lot. There are a lot of examples out there, and I want to cite a YouTube channel by a guy named Dave McKeegan. But there are a lot of other sources to find information like this. But Dave McKeegan is a photographer who, for the past several years, has been debunking images that people claim are photoshopped or something of either the flat Earth or of the moon landing conspiracy. Just the moon landing. They claim that it's fake because that's the conspiracy theory. Anyway, I wanted to say this because this is why I personally find researching conspiracy theories so interesting. And it harkens back to something that I said earlier, that if you had never really put any thought into it, and then somebody with some level of authority tells you, we faked that, you're more likely to believe it because you've never really considered it. And so here's the anecdote that I wanted to say. I won't say any names because these are real people. When I was a junior in high school, we had a teacher who was a younger guy who, let me say this is my first introduction to the idea that anyone thought we didn't go to the moon. Until that point, I was, you're taught in elementary school, we went to the moon in 1969. I was like, okay, that's what we did. It's a thing that happened. I was taught about it. Moving on. It was 11th grade in high school. The teacher says, I think we've been to the moon since, but I don't think we went there the first time. And that's where I came into the conversation. So I was like, what do you mean you think we've been there since? What is this conversation? They explained to me, we're talking about the fact that the moon landing was faked. My mind was blown. Not for the reason that you think, not because I suddenly realized the moon landing was faked, but rather I went home that day and I talked to my brother and I was like, you think we went to the moon, right? And he's like, yeah. And I talked to 5 other people. I was like, do you think we went to the moon? Everybody here in my life, you guys all believe we went to the moon, right? And everybody's like, yes. And I was like, did you know there are people who don't think we went to the moon? And my brain was blown. It exploded. I just didn't know that was even a thing. And rather than dive into the conspiracy theory and buy into it myself, I started researching, why do people not think we went to the moon? And this has been a through line for the rest of my life, that why I think conspiracy theories are interesting. I never want to be in a position where somebody says, well, we couldn't have gone to the moon because this would have happened. As soon as I hear that, I immediately want to look up what is the explanation. what is like how it actually works. And so I love watching things that debunk conspiracy theories because it's like, I never want to say I reject what you're saying because it isn't in line with what I already believe. That's what I want to avoid. And so here's an example of something that threw me. When the lander landed on the surface of the moon, it kicked up dust. It kicked up the dirt on the surface of the moon. The bottom of the lander is not dirty. And I was like, that's fascinating. Why is that the case? And obviously, conspiracy theorists say it's because it was placed there and that was an oversight. Obviously, they didn't think that, because if a helicopter lands, it kicks up all this dirt and, the bottom of the helicopter will be covered in dust. The reason for that is we are in an atmosphere that when something is landing, it pushes debris away, and then something has to take its place. So it causes this, and I'm doing it with my fingers, but I can't do it in an audio format. It causes this loop where from the surface, it will curve around and loop back to above where it was pushed away from. And on the moon's surface, that doesn't happen. It just pushes stuff away. I learned that, and that was, it all made sense understanding the physics and keeping in mind it's not an atmosphere and gravity being lower and how everything is going to be different. And that's where I'm like, yeah, you have to look into why things are the way they are. Like when somebody makes a claim, don't just say, I don't believe that. Say, why don't you believe that? And so I find that fascinating.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that, you have to look at the physics of the moon because all of the same laws of physics apply, but there's less gravity and there's no air. And so all of these things that they think, oh, you can fake that real easily. You really can't, because there's two things you would have to do. You would either somehow have to remove all the gravity, which the only way I can think of doing that effectively is going to be either filming it all underwater, which clearly it wasn't, or doing it in an airplane, which it couldn't have been anyway, because, they have all this continuous footage. So obviously they didn't go up and down and up and down.
Well, and then on top of that too, like you have to think about how big that theoretical plane would have had to have been.
Yeah.
To fit, for example,
the moon lander,
lander.
That's true. The lander's right there. You can see them climbing on it. So it's like, but the other thing is that whatever they filmed it in would have to have been in a vacuum. So, you're looking at a sound stage at this point, and you can't, with the lander that size, obviously you're right. You can't put it in an airplane or something like that. But this sound stage then wouldn't have low gravity capabilities. It'd be mounted to the ground. It's a sound stage. So
maybe they took it to the International Space Station and they built a soundstage there and they staged it.
Yeah. Yes. Maybe they built the soundstage on the moon and sent the astronauts there and then filmed everything indoors and then came home.
And they sent Stanley Kubrick up.
How were the cameras already set up? Huh? That's one of the arguments.
Yeah. I saw that because I was looking at a list of the conspiracy theories, and like the rebuttal to that is there was just a camera on the outside of the spaceship.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and also on top of that, there's actually evidence that some of what we have seen is they literally they pulled a modern day TikToker. They got out, set up a camera, went back in, and did it again. There is footage of them doing that for one of the Apollo missions.
You'll notice
which
that
I think is funny.
If you watch the actual footage of the moon landing, it is not shot like a movie. It's like
it's done by a lot of rank amateurs.
That is just how good Kubrick is.
That's it, right? That was the concept. It was like, this needs to look like it. So the last thing that I have on this topic is a little similar to Joe's original point of why haven't we been back? And it's just something that kind of like eats in your brain rather than it being an actual argument. Is a thing that I just find to be like the most morbid aspect of the whole thing, and that is that the contingency for the Apollo crew to not make it back, the fact that they were like willing to do that just bothers me on an existential level.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I kind of like struggle with it.
I think that's fair.
Well, and yeah, I guess that kind of comes back to, I think that's part of the reason why, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't most of the people chosen for those early missions all from either science or military backgrounds?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they were doing it for the country. They were prepared.
They were so ready to give their life for this simply because for the scientists, this is such groundbreaking material for them. And then for the military men, it's some of them, I'm sure it's also the fact that like, this is exciting. This is the next step. This is something that they will be able to experience that no one else will. And then two, like you said, they're doing this for the country. This is just an extension of their service.
I mean, yeah, the idea that was their mindset is... Yeah, so this is a dangerous one to ask maybe, but what are the hardest conspiracy theory claims that you've come across, listeners?
It doesn't have to be about the moon.
Doesn't have to be about the moon, and how are they debunked, or how have you tried to debunk them? These are all things I'm fascinated by. But in the meantime, we do have a second question, and it has nothing to do with the moon, though I'm sure we can find a way to make it. Question 2 this week is, what is the feasibility of Sonic the Hedgehog breathing from air bubbles underwater? And what are some other wacky snorkeling ideas?
I just want to say that I just wanted the question to stop it. What's the feasibility of Sonic the Hedgehog?
What's the feasibility of Sonic the Hedgehog? Well, then we're going to talk about the Flash, and we're going to talk about...
no, I don't want to talk about
light
him.
Speed travel, yeah.
He is the fastest thing alive, if the song is to be believed.
Well, so I guess that's a good point, Jim, that I didn't think about. And we can absolutely talk more about Sonic the Hedgehog. I love talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. I like Sonic the Hedgehog. But I guess it's important to note that we're specifically talking about that one game mechanic that maybe doesn't have to do necessarily with Sonic. So I might explain for our listeners just a little bit. In the Sonic the Hedgehog video games, the titular character Sonic, who may or may not be a hedgehog, can't swim, but rather when he's underwater, he runs along the ground. There is a time limit for how long he can hold his breath. Most of the time you have to get out of the water to get air. But if you're in a situation where you can't get out of the water in time, you'll get this countdown. And strategically placed throughout the whole track that he's running on, there are little collections of air bubbles that come up from the ground, and every so often a really big one will bloop out of the ground, and if Sonic jumps into it, he will inhale that air, and the timer will reset. So he's essentially finding an air pocket to breathe in. That way, we can talk about Sonic, or we can just talk about breathing underwater. We've covered our bases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was reading that I thought was really fascinating about the whole subject was that if you are seeing bubbles coming up from underwater, there's a very good chance you shouldn't try to breathe them because they probably don't have any oxygen in them.
Okay.
Yep. They are most likely either some sort of carbon monoxide or methane.
Yeah, methane was the one I saw most common, but yeah, methane, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, just a lot of the stuff you shouldn't breathe. They make beautiful bubbles.
Can either of you suggest what might be causing those to happen?
A lot of those get trapped underground. So like there are pockets of methane specifically trapped underground. Volcanism releases a lot of carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide and things like that. So
So I'll put out there too. Now a lot of times that these underwater levels do have like piping underneath, and so you could make an argument that some of those pipes are just having leaks, which means those could actually be breathable air of some kind. Which actually brings me to my first point of how this is actually feasible.
Sure.
To get kind of not your basic level of scuba diving certificates, but like for a more advanced one, you actually have to learn how to breathe from a stream of bubbles from a free-flowing regulator, which basically means it's broken, it's faulty.
Okay.
And so for a couple of minutes, for a couple of minutes, you literally have to learn how to breathe from that broken air. And it's literally just bubbles flowing off of either the regulator or the tank itself.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about, which is weird because I think I repressed that memory. But I was going to say, I know there's one in Florida and I know there's probably a few in California. I forgot to look up specific names of these. There are performances of mermaid shows where the divers will wear mermaid tails and be underwater in a big like aquarium tank that you can stand and see them swimming around. And obviously the draw of them being quote unquote mermaids, like real mermaids, is that they do not wear breathing apparatus on them. Breathing apparati, I suppose. And the way they usually do this is they will have tunnels they can go into where they can like surface in a secret pocket of air, and they will also have strategically placed breathing hoses where they can get oxygen from. And one of the things they do is what Joe is describing is we called it a bubble curtain. And they will do that, one, to replace a curtain in a stage performance. They will like have bubbles come up to obscure your view so that it can say the mermaids are taking a nap when the performers will want to leave. But there are also some that will do that inhaling through the broken pipe as you're describing, which, I mean, unless you really, really want to be certified to instruct in scuba diving, I don't recommend doing.
Yeah, everyone I've talked to or that I've read online about say that it's a miserable experience.
It's literally crisis training.
Yeah.
And so it's a good thing to know how to do if you're going to be underwater, but I don't want to be underwater anymore. I don't want to be underwater without a scuba tank.
Yeah.
I want my scuba tank to just work. That's my solution.
Yeah. Just have a tank that works. Don't take the broken one.
Don't take the broken one. Yeah.
I saw that actually online, and so in theory, Sonic could do this. He'd need to have a bubble that has oxygen in it, or at least breathable air. Oxygen, nitrogen mix, whatever. So,
and it wouldn't be from one giant bubble because that's not how oxygen collects underwater.
Nope.
Right.
I don't know, and I didn't look into this, but I don't know if we could make oxygen collect in that type of bubble, just surrounded by water. I feel like we just can't do that.
So it would have to be purposefully done.
Sure.
Like it would need to be a situation where you basically have some sort of basically bubble creating device that you're basically instead of like blowing the bubble as normal, you're literally shooting like pure oxygen into it, or at least, more normal breathable air into it. But even then, you're going to have to make the bubble material out of something that's a little bit more protective than just soap.
Sure. Another issue with that is just the way that oxygen interacts with water based on its density, right? So we could try to make some kind of self-contained, or not self-contained, but a smaller little aquarium that we put water in, and we try to make it so that there's air in the middle of it and water, and you could only really do that without gravity, because what's really just going to happen is all the water is going to go down and all the air is going to go up. And what's interesting about that is even if you put that in a zero gravity situation, it is more likely that you will have a bubble of water surrounded by air.
Yep.
I don't know why that is. That's interesting, though.
Well, and then that's why, like, even, like, don't get me wrong, I love the Sonic video games. I think that they're great, but that's why, like, that mechanic has always been silly to me. Because, it's It is so not feasible as like an actual, like, yeah, there's going to be this giant bubble and then you can breathe it and you'll be fine. No, that's not how it works. It's
nothing wrong
like
with
we've
the
discussed,
helicopter
it's a
tails
column. It's a column of bubbles, and
Yeah.
you're literally having to like stand there. Well, actually, even then, for him, it's stand there. For everyone else, it's like find a way to manage to swim there steadily
Yeah.
long enough that you can displace the water in your mouth with enough oxygen to breathe.
Mhm.
In reality, what would make more sense for Sonic would be some sort of like diving bell.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to mention diving
Interesting.
bells.
Because there's actually animals that do this.
Hmm.
For example, the diving bell spider.
Oh, I know what you mean. Okay. I thought you meant like an actual, like, for real human type diving bell.
Well, I mean, for Sonic, it would be.
Well,
because he's
mechanically it is the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, because the spider, it like grabs an air bubble and brings it under with it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With webbing.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
makes a cup of...
Sonic knows how to spin webs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He spins a lot. He knows how to spin.
To be fair, actually, that weirdly makes a lot of sense. If he could like spin fast enough that he just traps his own bubble of air.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about is just how fast bubbles move underwater. And so, yeah, like a steady stream would be fine. But if you were looking for like the one big bubble, you'd have to be like right there on top of it because it's going to get out of your way fast.
Yeah.
To be fair, that is why he's super fast.
That's true.
Gotta go fast.
Even the smaller column of bubbles that we've been talking about, in theory, he could be fast enough to like maneuver himself over a bunch of them all at once very quickly to breathe them. As silly as that would look on screen.
It would be neat if, rather than having to wait for the giant bubble to bloop up, you could just stand on this stream of bubbles and like the countdown doesn't go down as long as you're standing there.
Yep. You see,
Fix
that would make
Sega.
sense.
Yeah.
But again, then we come back to, maybe there's an item he can find or pick up that like is a diving bell for him. And then when you stand over those columns of bubbles, you can watch the diving bell refill with oxygen.
For our listeners, because this leads directly into what I was going to bring up next, for our listeners who don't know the expression diving bell, it's literally a bell or a cup or a bowl that you turn upside down, and as you plunge it down into the water, it traps air, and sailors used to use these before scuba was invented to catch clams and oysters and stuff, I guess, or look for treasure. I don't know. And the bell
Oysters
would go
are treasure.
down. Yeah. The bell would go down, trapping a small pocket of air that a diver could surface in and breathe long enough that they wouldn't have to go all the way back up to the surface. There are other games and other representations of this type of thing that I wanted to talk about, similar to an air pocket and a diving bell, which is just an air pocket in an underwater cave or a pirate ship. These are in things like Echo the Dolphin or Tomb Raider. And I was reading how common that type of thing is, and what I was finding is a lot of times it will happen with shipwrecks, that as the ship goes down, it will collect pockets of air. But naturally occurring air pockets in an underwater cave aren't super likely really deep down. They might be likely in a place where the tide goes up and down.
Yep.
This is what I wanted to know. If an air pocket is deep underwater and not connected to the surface, the air will eventually dissolve into the water due to pressure differences.
Okay.
So I didn't know that.
Well, the other thing that I was reading about, like, deep underwater air pockets is that they are also most likely methane and carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide, because it's bubbles coming up from the bottom, filling up spaces. And then, like you said, they will eventually bloop out of there and dissolve. But it's rough being underwater.
Even if there is oxygen, like even in a diving bell, this is not a long-term place that you can like set up camp. This is, if you're in this place, you're going to absorb the oxygen and replace it with carbon dioxide pretty quickly.
Yep. I hate to bring it up because it was such a terrible situation. There was the cave diving incident back in
not the one I thought you were gonna bring up.
2014 in Spain. Forgive me, I am probably going to butcher this pronunciation, but it's Cava dels Arquets, or Arquets. But basically, it was they were cave diving, and they ended up getting trapped in one of these temporary air pockets, and they kind of got lost in the dark and in these caves. Now, thankfully, they did make it out, but
was an experience.
Yeah.
So that's not the one I thought you were going to bring up, but it's similar. And we've talked about on this show before. Oh, I don't have a date on this. 2013, I think. So I guess a little bit before that. But we've talked about Harrison O'Keene, who was trapped under a ship for 3 days and then was rescued by some divers who just happened to be inspecting the shipwreck. So that's the one I thought you were going to bring up, because that's the one I knew about.
Fair. Yeah, I guess I was thinking more along since you had brought up the cave diving, I went with caves.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Underwater levels in video games make me incredibly nervous.
Oh yeah.
And
not Mario ones, because Mario doesn't drown in. Well, he does in the 3D games, but not the 2D.
That's true.
If there's the potential for drowning, I don't want to progress in the game. I just want to find an air pocket and just be like, okay, I'm here. I don't need to do it. And it's
Labyrinth Zone in Sonic 1 is just the worst.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. The only water level that never really gave me problems from that perspective was actually The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, simply because you've acquired the blue tunic and now can breathe underwater. And it's this is fine. Now the puzzle's infuriating.
Right, yeah.
But at least you can breathe underwater now.
So Jim made a good point. If in Mario, it never bothered me, and I never played. I've only played one Zelda game, and it was A Link Between Worlds.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I imagine that wouldn't bother me as much because, you can't run out of air. But there is another aspect that is not relevant. We don't have to stick on it, but there's another aspect of water in video games that it is often. You not only can't breathe, but you are put in a position of vulnerability because you can't maneuver very well. And so that's just the other aspect of why I hate water levels, especially if you're in a horror game or something. I have to walk through this water. Well, something's under there. Of course there's something under there. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's fair.
But
there is absolutely one that has given me a ton of anxiety. Subnautica.
Oh, I've played a little bit of that before, I think.
Yeah, that one seems kind of deep and creep.
Here's the thing. I love the game. I love it. But there is a part of me, especially as you progress in the game and you start getting deeper into the game, literally physically deeper.
Yeah.
And you start, because of the pressure differential, you burn through your oxygen so much faster.
Interesting.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so sure, you can produce it, you can build additional tanks, but then those take up inventory space, and then you can have vessel with you, but that vessel can't get into some of the tighter caves, and it becomes a really, really terrifying and disorienting as you do these cave dives.
That's
and
wild.
Then as your oxygen begins to run out and your vision begins to darken, and it's oh god, I am swimming for my life here. That always gets me in that game.
I wonder how I would feel. So I have a really weird relationship with horror as a genre. So early on in this question, the reason that I asked the question about what causes the bubbles coming up, what causes the methane, etc., was because I was looking for the first thing I thought of was the mermaid thing, where they could breathe out of the hoses that are strategically placed in the aquarium. And I was like, is there anything that actually does produce a stream of oxygen naturally? And I was looking that up, and I did not think about the other gases that might be bubbling. That's why I was like, oh, what causes that? Because maybe oxygen could be there. And so I just wanted to mention that I looked up things that do put oxygen into the water, such as aquatic plants and algae converting carbon dioxide to oxygen. And that's how fish breathe, right? Because fish breathe oxygen in the water.
Yeah.
Right.
There are also this isn't confirmed, but research suggests that there are some metals or pseudo metals, I don't know the geology about this, that are acting as geobatteries that they call it seawater electrolysis. And I guess they're currently looking into how effective that is. I don't know enough about it. And the important point, I just wanted to bring those up because I guess it's a relevant point that there is oxygen in water. But humans can't breathe it because it is mixed in with the water. So even with that, you would have to have gills to be able to survive in Sonic's situation.
Maybe Dr. Robotnik has laid so many power cables under the sea, and they all have very loose insulation on them, and they are continuously electrolyzing the water and creating huge bubbles of oxygen and hydrogen too, I suppose, if it's electrolysis.
Dang it, Jim. I just flat out buy that. I actually think that's just a good answer.
Well, and again, like that's actually why I also brought up the fact that a lot of times, like not every underwater level, but a lot of them do have machinery or piping as part of the level design.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
sense.
There's a decent chance that, it's some sort of, again, either a leak or hydrolysis effect that could potentially explain these bubble columns and then eventually the giant bubbles.
Dang it, Jim. This is supposed to be vaguely scientific.
How dare you?
How dare you give an actual answer?
Yeah, it's very science.
Leave it to the one labeled the scientist to come up with, science.
You're here as a figurehead.
You're not supposed to actually be sciencey.
Well, listeners, let us know this week. Is it Hydrocity Zone or Hydro City Zone? There is a correct answer. If you have any thoughts on that, or anything else we talked about, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com, or you can comment on our blog on the website, or you can like us on Facebook, or comment on a YouTube video. Hey, Jim, where do we get all these wacky questions?
We get them from you, the listener. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, you can email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, and all the other cool places that podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out. And so does telling your friends.
Tell all your friends.
Woo.
Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. There's all kinds of cool stuff over there. You never know what you're gonna find. You just never know,
unless you've been there recently.
That's true.
So thank you to Joe for coming back and talking to us.
Hey, happy to come back anytime.
Yay! And for Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
I was Joe.
See you in the movies.
Yeah, toodaloo, everyone.
Find me on the moon.
Yay! I believe the correct answer is Hydro City, though I still prefer Hydrocity.
I think Hydrocity just sounds cooler.
I think it sounds cooler. It's fun to say.
Yeah.
I like both, but
I like both
because I like to appease.
Yeah. They're not, neither one of them is bad.
I like to make demands. That's
That
what I like.
You would.